we've come to the point now where we are really zeroing in on getting prepared in reference to the level one exam, and I'm excited. We've covered a lot of material, and we have already have your study guides and everything ready for you. And in fact, you may not believe this, but we even have even have a mock test. I mean, that has some of the actual questions on it. Our goal is not to in any way um, cause you to have fear about taking this exam for your recertification. No, it's just the opposite. We're giving you the subject areas, and we're also giving you the idea of exactly what the questions are going to be. Going to be some fill in the blank and multiple choice, etc. And the fun will be test to take. Will be I'm sorry, the test would be fun to take, and you really don't have to worry about it. It's if you don't like what you do the first time, you can take it over and over again till you get it right. The main thing is for you to be understanding exactly what's expected of you going forward with the rest. You're going to feel extremely confident in knowing the basic information. And the fact I'm going to uh, show you a video in just a moment in which you can see exactly why it is important. And I'm going to be sending you some handouts. And one of the handouts I'm going to be sending you is the types of jobs that are now open for you if you can get to that level of where you can actually facilitate one of the rest groups in a hospital setting or a drug treatment program, etc. And even the thing that we're dealing with is evolving so fast that what used to be complementary and alternative medicine, which included us and everything else that was not um, mainline medicine, which includes mostly pharmaceutical meds and surgery, the field has now decided to rename complementary and alternative medicine to integrative medicine. So the med schools now have set up departments called integrative medicine. In other words, how can they take what we have, the spiritual part of it, and integrate it into the conventional medical system? It's exciting. It really is exciting, which means there are going to be more jobs out there than ever before for individuals that have been trained to provide spiritual interventions in group therapy in a group setting. Okay, and as I mentioned before, one of the areas that is moving forward faster than most of the other areas is the cancer field. Hospitals that take on cancer patients, and there are a lot of hospitals now that have just a huge separate division dealing with cancer patients, and this is where they want prayer groups and all the other spiritual interventions or faith-based interventions that science is proving works and improves the results of conventional medicine. Okay. So it's just a beautiful time to live, to study, and to go to the next level in employment, next level in income, and the whole chain of events that could take place. All right, if you were to prepare yourself and put yourself out there in order to get another job or a higher paying job or more exciting job than what you have today, serving God at the same time. I mean, you can't beat it. Okay. You're making a living serving God. So you don't have to be just a pastor now to do that. You can be a spiritual based or faith based rest counselor. Okay, the first video I'm going to show you explains exactly why it is necessary for you to become recertified, upgraded with 21st century changes that REST has made for REST to be more competent, more effective, and more efficient in our healing business. For the last 3 months, we've been looking at level 1 certification, and we've been studying REST and CST from a standpoint of you're becoming updated with new information and reviewing some of the things that you previously learned that also may have been upgraded. And we've done this because we are offering recertification for those that want to move forward with the REST program, to actually even consider doing this in terms of working in the field and being paid for it. And I've talked about the many opportunities that are opening every day for individuals that understand the whole subject of spiritual therapy and who can facilitate spiritual therapy groups. And I don't believe that there's any training in the U.S. today that prepares people to the degree that REST does in terms of running or facilitating spiritual-based groups. But in our effort to update you and to help you to review some of the material that you may even have forgotten or maybe didn't understand fully, we have to be very aware that this field, like every other field, whether it's being a carpenter or being a school teacher, whatever, every special field has a special vocabulary. And sometimes the same word does not mean the same thing across lines of different entities. And especially when you're dealing with emotions and with sicknesses, etc., you have to be aware of the language that is a part of the particular field that you're in. And of course, we are in the mental health field, even though what we do has great implications for physical health. And that's why spiritual groups are so important today in hospitals and in treatment programs. Remember that at no time in history has there ever been the amount of scientific support for spirituality as there is today. And because of the support, hospitals and every other organization in the country can feel at ease in using spiritual techniques and programs. But the key is to have people that are properly trained. And when you look at the research on REST, I mean, it is as solid as any graduate type of program when the two are measured according to the individuals that are being researched. And before I even began working with members of various churches and certifying them, I had the approval and the support of my major organization that I belong to, which is the APA, the American Psychological Association, that if I followed the track that I presented to them in terms of our training, the 2 years of the classwork and the supervised internship during the third year, that my clients could be as efficient and as effective as others who had degrees that they did not have. The subject areas that we've been looking at, number one, are REST terms and REST phrases. You have to be knowledgeable about all of the terms that we use, even those terms that are just alphabetized. Like, for instance, when we say CST, everybody that goes through REST should immediately understand, well, that's our major intervention. That's cognitive spiritual therapy. We used to be rational emotive spiritual therapy, but thank God for the scientific studies, all right, that said that we have gone beyond that. We're to a place where we're not just looking at the mind as a rational organization, but we're looking at the mind now and its many functions that rest employs. And one of those that I can call right off the bat for you is that a number of the things that we do, like PMRT, involves both sides of the brain. When you close your eyes and you imagine a beach, you are on the right-hand side of the brain. Most of the time, when you're talking about being rational, you're on the left-hand side of the brain. So we are determined by science as being a holistic approach to healing, using both sides of the brain. In other words, we are not just focusing in on the rational part, but we are focusing in on all parts of the brain. And so when you look at the questions that we ask at the end of each study, like question number 3, if in the not too distant future you find a similar situation, what are you going to say to yourself that's different? Now that person has to go into that part of the brain that is going into the storage area of the brain and then recalling or retrieving that information. They're looking at that information that they have looked at in the past, retrieve it to deal with a situation that's in the future. So even though you may not have understood that, it is necessary today that you understand rest and the deepness of our techniques, whether you fully can understand them biologically. You ought to be able to explain them to the degree that I just explained that to you. PMRT is the same thing. That is one of the major tools that if you go to work for a hospital or even for your church in terms of stress reduction, that form of stress reduction has tons of scientific support. So it's not something that we are responsible for developing. It's just that we spiritualize a technique that I learned years ago, and I readapted it for drug addiction that has the capability of taking a person who is craving and have them walk through their mind to the point that they can say release and the cravings are released. You have to get not only good at performing PMRT, progressive muscle relaxation technique, but you've got to be able to understand how it works so that you can effectively use it. STDs, spiritual thoughts that we're dealing with, they're either self-destructive thoughts or they're self-healing thoughts. So you say STD, immediately you have to connect with that. Well, that's a negative thought. That's a self-destructive thought. That's a thought that has to be replaced. So you have to learn the words, and you have to learn the words from the standpoint of what model they are a part of, what are the circumstances that are going to be used. And of course, you need all of these in group therapy. So it's just not something that you're doing, it's something that you're facilitating. And of course, the Holy Spirit does the rest. You have to understand why those emotions are negative emotions. A better word for negative is we use negative because we have negative results that are the end product of those emotions. The results are negative because if you look at each one of those 12 emotions, you'll find that there is pain associated with each one of those emotions. Right? You get too stressed, you're going to feel distressed. That's a form of pain. So you are helping people when you're taking them through those 12 lessons to go from a painful emotion to a pleasant emotion. So you may not know the pleasant emotion that they feel as a result of the pain they felt. And a lot of times it depends on how much pain they had. Some people under stress don't want to live any longer. They get not only stressed, but depressed because they can't do anything about their stress. So you have to understand those 12 emotions. That's why we say when you go through that first course, Finding Personal Spiritual Healing, you've got to be to the place where you are healing yourself, that you can testify, I went from a hurting situation where I didn't want to get up and face the world. to a situation that I felt good when I woke up in the morning. I was anxious to get out there and work on behalf of my Lord, even through working with my family or whatever. When it comes to the brain, you learned enough about the brain to understand some things that other people just don't know. I mean, even when you were taught to watch people's eyes, you're actually watching their brains and how their brains are working. So anyway, that's where we are going. And so I appeal to you in this video to take this whole process of recertification seriously. And God will take you places you've never been before. Okay, so that kind of sums up where we are in terms of what the needs are for recertification. And believe me, I'm excited about the possibilities for you and where we've come with each of these features, each of the interventions, and of course, the more trained you get, the more insights you'll get into understanding even a simple intervention such as prayer. So now, for the next 2 weeks, we're going to zero in on that exam. I'm going to be doing some tutoring to the exam so that you can make sure that you really understand what we are looking for in terms of your skill level and your knowledge level. And today I'm going to pick up a piece now that we kind of brushed over, and some of you may never have seen or had this particular class dealing with models of human nature. It's something that you really need to understand. Okay, so we're going to finish up with models of human nature, and then next week and the following week we'll deal specifically with the level 1 examination. So we're going to take a moment and we're going to look at the video on 4 models of human nature. In other words, why do people do what they do when they do it? Okay, 4 classifications or models that kind of explain that. Because when you're sitting in a group, it's you got 10 people in front of you, 8 to 10, 7 to 10, whatever that may be, sitting in front of you. And there's a good chance that their personalities may be extremely different. And so we are all not motivated the same way. But you'll have to find out a way within the classification of uh, these individuals that's going to show out in the video, that what can you do for that particular person? What model will work in your dealing with that particular person as opposed to the next person that you're going to be dealing with as you facilitate that group, right? So 4 models of human nature. Today's lesson is on Level 1, Course 2, Basics of Faith-Based Group Facilitation and Faith-Based Intervention. For those of you that are keeping records, this is a part of Modulo 3, and the class is entitled Models for Understanding the Nature of Man. I'm Dr. Rick McKinney, the instructor for this particular class. A model is a physical representation of something. For instance, the atom is a model or a form of representation of humanity. We use models or pictures, or what we call pictures. In the brain, they're actually called neurosignatures. But we use these models to conceptualize information and to enhance our memory. It's a matter of science that information is stored in the brain in pictures. And that's why someone has said that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Actually, some pictures are worth millions of words. So I want to discuss with you 4 models where you can develop pictures in terms of understanding the nature of man. The first is the system models, which is the foundation for holism, the whole movement toward mind-body medicine. The second model is the Maddie model. It's called the Maddie model of consistency. And the third one is the measurement of normality model. And the fourth one is the model, the hierarchy of needs by Abraham Maslow, Dr. Maslow. Let's start with the system model. The system model is a representation of all humans, and we call it the trichotomy of sameness. In other words, a trichotomy. We're talking about now, again, holism, where the body and the mind and the emotions, although they are 3 different entities, they form a whole organism. In other words, whatever affects either one of the entities in this model affects the other 2. And so if you can imagine 3 circles overlapping at some point, you'll have an idea of how these 3 entities are interdependent as well as dependent on each other. Now, since we're studying about humans, to relate them to the system model, there are 5 things about humans in the system model. First of all humans have all 3 sectors: body, mind, and emotion. And each sector is interrelated to the other. You can't separate the emotions from the person or the person's mind or either their body, and they still be a living organism. The fourth statement about the relationship between this model and humans is that humans function best when each sector is properly balanced. if each sector is activated and operating at its best, and they're interrelated, then you have a strength of character that's there. In other words, the mind isn't making all the decisions. Some of the decisions are made by both the mind and the emotions, and taking consideration the body. When either sector is making the most decisions, there seems to be an imbalance. And that brings me to the fifth particular statement about the relationship with using a model to understand human nature, is that humans become sick if they become unbalanced. And they malfunction in some way when either sector works improperly. Now you think about that. A person could be in pretty good mental health, but could be in emotional straits, could be having serious emotional problems. And they could look good from the standpoint of their body and seem to be thinking okay. But it's just a matter of time between the illness of the emotional self begins to permeate the mental self as well as the physical self. And there's a good chance, without some kind of help in recognizing that these three interplay the way that they do, then the effort might be to treat the emotional self, since it seems to be the sick self, with little regard to the mind and to the physical body. And that's why today most medical forms and a lot of medical practitioners are moving toward what we call holistic medicine, in which, regardless of what sector gets sick, the treatment is so laid out that it assists in maintaining the other two sectors. The second model that I want to talk to you about is the Maddie model. Years and years ago, when I was doing my research for my dissertation, one of the things that he discovered and wrote about were the ways in which all humans are alike and the ways in which all humans are different. So you have to have a base understanding of both entities, how humans are alike and how humans are different. So he says all humans are in some way different and in some way alike. And he calls our differences peripheral traits, and our similarities, they're core traits. And so there's a symbolism that is used where a triangle forms the outer part of the self, and then there are arrows that are in motion on the inner part. The triangle would be the peripheral on the outside, and the moving arrows on the inside would be the core. So the ways we are all different now, he calls outward differences. And there are four ways in which all people are different. The outside stuff is what makes a big difference, because we are different in how we look. There are no two people that are alike, including how we appear to other people. Now this is important, because as counselors, and you have a group of 10 people, when you look out over that group of 10 people, you're going to see that on the outward appearances, they all look different in some way. Either differences in sex or in size or in skin color. And you, as a counselor, have to be kind of indifferent in reference to allowing how they look to interfere with you in reference to you're using your cultural judgments to draw conclusions about the people that are sitting in front of you, because you may not like the way they dress. And this is important if we're going to resonate with teenagers today, because most adults really don't like the way teenagers are dressing, especially with their pants hanging down, or the rings in the ears, nose, and the multicolored hair or whatever. But we must remember that that's the peripheral differences, the outside, what we can see. The second type of peripheral difference is culture, how we're raised, the environment, our heritage, how we're developed, the education that we've had. All different. The third form of differences is how we interpretate environmental input. You can have twins there looking out at the window and they're looking at the same cute kitten. One person starts feeling all warm and fuzzy about the kitten. The other twin cringes. Same kitten, all right, but different interpretations of that kitten. All right, first through the eyes, then through the brain, then the emotional self gets involved, and the physical body reacts differently. And then the fourth way is how we respond to external and internal stimuli. Well, take pain, for instance. People have different, what we call pain thresholds. That's the level at which they tolerate pain. There's some person can go into a dentist's office and just to get their teeth cleaned, and they're screaming. They see blood of any kind, they almost faint. And other people can come in and the dentist can drill, and they never say a mumbling word. The difference in levels of pain. Can't judge one person because they have a higher pain threshold than another person. That's just another way in which we are different. But we don't want to focus on the way that we're different. Okay, that's what Satan does. He has us focusing on people's differences. We want to look at what Maddie called core traits, the ways in which we are all alike. The key to effective multicultural counseling and therapy across all avenues of differences is to understand and utilize the core traits, not the peripheral traits. We want to focus in on the core traits, what's happening with the inside of a person, how they feel internally, how they think internally, what their sickness is, etc. Okay, so we want to remember that it's the core traits that we want to zero in on to establish rapport and to get where the illness is. And those are the traits, the inside traits. And there are four basic core systems that we use in rest therapy. And the first one, of course, is the body, the internal biological systems and organs. And this is important. I mean, we're not going to cover it now. It'll be probably another year before we get heavily into this. But you're going to be seeing research that shows that when certain mental health conditions are healed, then there are certain related body functions that start also getting better. Again, now I'm going back to what we were talking about earlier with holistic medicine. And that's one of the reasons why so many hospitals today are getting to the place where they're using spirituality, because spirituality is a holistic concept. The second core system is the mind, and I'm going to spend at least our class next week on the mind. I may have to spend 2 classes. But we want to look at the mind in terms of its relationship to the body and to emotions. And then the third system is emotions. Now, one of the things you'll learn next week that I'll get into is that the mind, and we'll talk about the difference between the brain and the mind, but the mind operates on just two methodologies in terms of its communications. One on neurons or electricity, and the other one on emotions, which are molecules called peptides. So all the information in the brain is going to be communicated throughout the entire body through one or two of those mediums, either through electricity or through the liquid systems in the body, which include the blood and other channels where liquids flow. And the third core of the inside is the needs core. And one of the things that all the organs and all the cells need, of course, nutrition, and they need cleansing. But they also need positive information in reference to positive and clear information in reference to what they are to do next. So you're going to look at the types of communications that we specialize in, and one of them is prayer. So prayer is invaluable, and in fact, one of the books that I overview in a document that I'm going to give you very soon is I preview I think 7 books written by medical doctors, and one of them is called "Prayer is Good Medicine," and in that they kind of relate prayer being an internal discussion that a person has normally, okay, especially if they get in trouble, right? And even if they are praying out loud, the sound of their voice, they hear the sound of their voice, and so once it gets in your ears, it goes back through your electrical system and down through the channels of both electricity and the chemicals in your body, and flows throughout the whole body. So one of the reasons why we're looking at the different organs and the different functions, the different systems in the body, is for that reason. That information is channeled there, and the human mind is voice activated. And a lot depends on what you are saying to yourself and what you are listening to. So there's a sameness in all internal body organs and functions. And this has been made very, very clear in the last 20 years because, Satan has done his work. I mean, he's been masterful in manipulating the human population so that they're divisive and there's a lot of prejudice and a lot of hate, just judging people on the peripheral stuff, and then making some conclusions about who's smart and who's dumb based on what color their skin is or where they were located, etc. But if a person just listens to that type of rhetoric, after a while they get to be sick. And the capacity for hatred is diminished by the addition of love. So that's what our work is as therapists, right? Folk have a lot of hate issues, which creates a lot of problems for them, and it could be almost anything that's causing them to be filled with hate. But there's only one thing that will replace hate, and that's love. So the more love that they're exposed to, the less room there is for their capacity of hate. So we counteract Satan's goals toward mankind by doing what Jesus did. And it was Jesus that said, love your enemy. And I don't know if you've ever had any enemies, but I've had a few in my day. That's a very difficult thing to do. But you just never know. God can convert your enemy and they be your greatest friend. So Jesus' message of love was a form of healing. And the fact that he taught all humans are either brothers or sisters, which makes them have one Father, and that's God. And it's interesting that God was never called Father until Jesus came and called him Abba, our Father. What a heavy notion that is to people that have aught against their earthly father who left them, or maybe they never knew who he was, and they fight this empty neural signature they have in their mind. One picture is for father, one is for mother, and the father thing is empty. what a blessed thing when they come to know even through therapy, that they do have a Heavenly Father. And right away, that empty space of neural signature where Father should be, God is placed there. So when we do that, we are making a frontal attack on the stronghold of Satan. And as he is using the differences to divide the human race, we are using the samenesses to heal the human race. So which means that any cultural notions and prejudices that we have about people, their size or their clothing, what they wear, all this outward stuff, we got to get rid of it. If we're going to be good therapists, we can't have anything in the way. Our training and our calling to be a therapist is stronger than any negative cultural notions that we have. And so that we're not communicating to people that we're saying one thing, but we really believe something different. We believe that all men and women, all, I say the universal word, all men and women are brothers and sisters. Now, in a normal family, all brothers and sisters don't get along. Okay. But at least the belief is there. And whether or not it is acted out in each person's life, that's up to them. I've just started talking about some of the major internal organs that will show better relationships between the brain and the nerve system and the heart. Those are the three that are really involved in the communication channels. As I mentioned to you before, the brain operates on electricity and on chemicals. But it's the nerves that carries the electrical charge. And it's the heart that pumps blood that carries the peptides, along with oxygen and some other stuff, carries the communication molecules. And they now believe that the heart also creates certain hormones that bring peace and love and the bondingness between mother and children. So the brain, we're going to learn more about it, and the nerve system, the heart, the lungs, the intestines. Don't forget about the intestines. All right? Old folk used to say death begins in the gut, and they're absolutely right. Okay? They are absolutely right. We are what we eat. And again, I remind you that at some point in time, some of our nurses are going to be trained to help us understand that we've got to be fit for battle. Okay? We've got to be fit for battle. And those particular diseases or malfunctions that are preventable or that are curable, we've got to attack those. And so we have a 12-week lesson dealing with your health and the do's and don'ts. But the stomach is involved with it. Input, process, output. Garbage in, garbage out. Right? But if you're eating food that is not just nutritious, but nutrient-based, in other words, your body's going to use most of the food that you eat. You'll find you won't have to eat as much as you do. And your body will resonate because your cells only take in whatever nutrients that they need. And of course, they store the rest of it. Blood that carries the nutrients, it carries the oxygen, but also it carries messages. The kidneys, that's part of the cleansing process. The liver, detoxification of your body. All right. People sometimes can't think clear. Their memory is going because their body is just filled with toxins. Okay, and so their mind can't function. And there are a lot of people that die from toxic internal poisoning. Same internal systems. So when we're talking about nerves, we're really talking about the nervous system. The PNS, the peripheral nervous system, all right, it would be as close to the skin as it could be. The central nervous system, which is your brain and your spinal cord. But then amongst all of it is what we call the ANS, the autonomic nervous system. That takes over when you go to sleep at night. Okay? And sometimes people are so restless. All right? Well, there are certain things they need to do before they go to sleep. All right? There's certain thoughts that they need to have. Right before you go to sleep, there's no time to say, now I lay me down and sleep. I pray the Lord so to keep just to repeat a prayer. It really is a good time to ask God or to quote scripture. Great peace have they which love thy law. Nothing shall offend them. All right. Don't let the sun go down on your wrath. It's a good time to start cleaning out. So you can put yourself to sleep. The circulation, the digestive, respiration, the immune. And we'll talk about these things a little bit later on. And I've just talked about the endocrine system when I'm talking about these different chemicals in the body. So there's a lot to healing. And the more you know, the better healer you can be, because you need to see the convergence between mental health and physical health and emotional health. All right? So the healing process needs to go right straight through it to be holistic. So when you get people to identify the self-destructive thought, self-destructive means that it's not just a mental health thing, it's a physical health. Okay? The holistic concept of three rings. It's emotional. And we use those tools that we have to help a person become whole. I've come that they might have life, Jesus says, but not just ordinary life, an abundant life, a full life, a life full of health and wellness and life full of service. Okay, we're talking about now the 4 basic core systems that we utilize in rest therapy. And the third one is probably the one that we spend the greatest amount of time in, because we began with the third sameness, emotions and feelings. A good definition of therapeutic definition of emotions is that your emotions are chemical molecules made by the body, and they send messages throughout your body. Your feelings are how your mind interprets the message of these molecules. We could get deeper into that. We could say the same molecule goes throughout the body, and the mind records on one hand that it's happiness, and the other one it's confusion or whatever. The feeling is determined how your mind interprets the message that molecule is bringing. A good example of that would be, we have an emotional grid, if you look at it. And it has 4 cells in it. So emotions can be positive or negative. They can be pleasant or unpleasant. See, they can't be both positive and negative, or both pleasant and unpleasant, because the human brain can't have 2 opposite feelings at the same time. I didn't mean to jump ahead of the laws of the mind, but mark that one down. The human brain can't experience 2 opposite feelings at the same time. Someone would be crying, and say, why are you crying? They say, I'm crying tears of joy. Normally, crying is not associated with joy, but it's the experience that the person is going through that the mind interprets the molecules, the message going throughout the body. And on one hand, it would interpret it as being sad. On the other hand, being full of joy. It's the difference between crying at a funeral and crying at a birth of some child. So I want you to practice this, because again, in order for you to fully understand, or to understand to the best of your capacity, the 12 emotions that most people go through that become toxic, self-destructive, pathological. And remember, when we're talking about pathological emotions, we're talking about ordinary emotions, but they are out of control, or they're controlling you. They're not in the realm of normality. So when you look at those 12 emotions, you begin to understand more fully that those 12 emotions have degrees. And those degrees are represented on a feeling wheel. So what I want you to do in your manual that you get, the module 3 part of the manual, you'll see a picture of a feeling wheel. And there are probably close to 100 different emotions on here. And in the center, there'll be three positive emotions and three negative emotions, but they're on the bottom. The negative ones are on the bottom part of the wheel, and the positive ones are on the top part of the wheel. Okay, so all humans experience some of these 90, I think it probably is 90, 60 to 90 something. I forgot, I had counted them. But all humans experience some of these motions on this wheel to some degree, but they don't experience all of them. Some people are not aware of ever feeling some of them, whereas others may know that certain emotions exist, but they never experience them. So what I want you to do is it's one of the things that I want you to work at, so you can better understand your emotions. I wouldn't want someone, when you look at the grid and you ask somebody, well, how are you feeling at this very moment? And they say, I'm feeling nurturing, and you've never felt nurturing, so you may not be able to get into that emotion with them. So what I want you to do is, I want you to start from the center. It's like a big wheel that has three circles, and the emotions are in each circle. Starts out with the six basic emotions, like the negative emotions are scared, mad, and sad, and then they branch off from there. I want you to start in the center, and I want you to put an X beside each emotion that you personally have experienced, not what you've seen in the movies or something of this nature. Okay, you personally have experienced, and there may be some here that you don't even know if you experienced because you don't know what they mean. Then look it up. Like, for instance, someone says to you, I'm feeling very serene. All right. Have you ever felt serene? Well, what I want you to do, I want you to look it up. Okay. But if you will look at serene and follow it back up, all right, it's a branch off of loving, which is a branch off of peacefulness. Serene. So do that for me. Mark them, and then right above the picture of the feeling wheel, there's a box there. And I want you to count all the emotions now that you have experienced. Okay, now I know this is kind of tough because some of you were really struggling with, can you remember the last time that you were angry? Now I'm asking you, I want you to remember if you've had any of these emotions. If you remember that you had these emotions, then you can recall when it was and where you were. Now I'm building up your ability to get inside yourself, because again, right, we're going to be working with these clients. Now you'll have 10 people, up to 10 people, that's a max, sitting in a circle, right? And you are taking them through the 12 pathological emotions. There's 12 lessons over a 15-week period. And you're going to be asking them, okay, on a scale from 1 to 10, how angry were you? Well, you already know that anger has, it's a gradation of feelings, going from upset to being enraged, and all different degrees of negative emotions in between. So that's all this wheel is saying, okay? That we have all these different emotions that branch off of the basic emotions. You need to know that. So when a person says to you, I'm feeling frustrated, you have an idea what frustration could lead to. It could lead to anger, or I'm feeling skeptical, or whatever. You know, all right. So would you do that for me? I want you to do that so that we, at the beginning of our next webinar, we can talk about these emotions. The more you get in touch with yourself, the more you can get in touch with other people. Okay, but it's kind of difficult trying to get into somebody's emotional experience, which is an open door for us. That's where we work. That's where we walk around. That's territory that we get used to. Okay, and sometimes it's like walking through the valley of the shadow of death. That's okay. God is with us. We will fear no evil. All right? So do it. Work on it for me. All right? I want you to become a master at the basics of rest. And then I have another exercise for you. It says, do you know your own feelings and emotions? Now, I've talked about that grid, whether the emotions are positive or negative, unpleasant or pleasant. I've got a form there for you where you to put down one emotion that you know that was both pleasant and positive, and another one that you could feel was unpleasant but turned out to be positive, or a negative emotion that was pleasant, or a negative emotion that was unpleasant. So when you're thinking about an emotion being positive, a definition that I've placed there for you is that it means that it has a good outcome for you. And remember what we said? That a tree bears, that's one of the laws. So if you have an emotion that's at an 8, your behavior is going to be at an 8. Okay? So if it's a positive emotion at an 8, then your behavior is going to be at an 8, or the outcome. That's what the behavior is all about. It's going to be at an 8. What I'm saying to you, there are some exceptions to the rules. Right? There may be an emotion that starts out as an 8 that's pleasant for you, but then the output becomes negative. Think about it, because you're going to be dealing with some issues like that. And one of those issues is pain. Okay? One of those issues is pain, which most people see as negative. All right? Or castor oil, the taste of castor oil and the thought that comes to your mouth, how it makes you feel. Yeah, you know. You ask a kid, well, when you take castor oil, how do you feel? They say, yucky. Okay. But believe me, castor oil will do the job. You don't feel yucky when it gets to working on you. All right? So you can have a positive emotion because it has a good outcome for you, and you can have a negative emotion because it has a good outcome for you. I just mentioned pain. Can some pain, whether it's physical or psychological, a lot of times the mind doesn't know the difference. But is it possible for it to be unpleasant? Okay? Or negative to us, and yet to end up being good and positive? Think about that. Now we're getting into the area of pain management, which you're not ready for yet, but I'm just setting you up for that. Okay? All right, managing pain. Why is it that some people can handle more pain than other people? They got a higher threshold. Well, how do you get a higher threshold? It's what you're saying to yourself about pain. If you're out there screaming, oh, this is killing me, it's killing me, that's where you're going to feel. You're going to feel like it's killing you. Okay? And then you find out you didn't die. So I don't know where you got that thought on the 10 because you didn't die. So in the third cell, it's going to be positive but unpleasant. And in the fourth cell, it's going to be negative but unpleasant. And if you have any problems with that, of course, you can call me if you don't understand it or whatever. Okay? Maslow is one of the founders of what we call humanistic psychology, or humanistic counseling. He was a genius of a man. The university from which I got my doctorate, they were humanistic. And I'm going to define humanistic in just a moment. You'll see where in my teachings and some of the things that I'm teaching you to do and to be is humanistic. He died too early, too young. He was 62 when he died. But he created something that is so revealing even today. He constructed what we call a hierarchy of need. Now, when you look at it on this video, you're going to see a pyramid that has 6 divisions on it. I'm going to discuss them in just a moment. But the other thing that you're going to have in your workbook is some information about Maslow, Abraham Maslow, and also about a follower of his, a disciple of his, that lived to carry on his work, and his name is Carl Rogers. So I grew up in graduate school with Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. And I loved it because both of them must have had a personal relationship with God by the things that they said in terms of how you are to treat people, especially when they're in therapy. All right? But what Abraham says is that most humans operate or make decisions based on deficit of some need. A deficit of some need. All right. Now, when he said need, he's talking about the drives that we have in our body. Okay. The drives that we have in our body. So I'm not going to read any of that to you because I have 2 documents. One, this is a 1-pager about Rogers and Maslow, and I think you'll enjoy it. But one of the things that you're going to notice that they both say constantly, and that is that to be a good therapist, you have to be a client-centered therapist. In other words, you're using the tools and the interventions for the sake of the clients. You're not doing it just because you know it. All right? You are adapting them and using them based upon the client's needs. And so they talk about client-centered therapy. And the other thing that they stress, that I stress also, is you've got to be in the here and the now. Even when you're running a group, you've got to be there. You've got to, we're going to teach you to hear what people aren't saying, okay, or to see what people mean when they're talking. So your eyes and your ears are working together at the same time. But in order to do that, you've got to be in the here and the now. And you've got to get your clients that are sitting out there in front of you, if they start straying off into yesterday or tomorrow, you've got to bring them back to the here and now. Because healing is not in the past. Healing is not in the future. Healing is now, right here, in this group. And I want you to kind of keep that on your mind. So briefly, I'm going to go over Maslow's model for you. It's a big pyramid, and it has 5 sections. The first section is the base, the bottom part, and you're probably looking at it while I'm talking. Okay, and it's called the physiological part of his pyramid. It's the widest, but it's also the strongest. The lower the levels, the stronger the drive. So the first level has the strongest drive. And what's on the first level? Your need for food, your need for sleep, your need for air, your need for water, your need for sex. Those are strong drives. All of them are very, very strong drives. And they're essential to life, all 5 of them. You can't live very long without food. You definitely can't live without sleep. I mean, I used to challenge sleep all the time. One time I had 5 churches, man. I'm driving, trying to get to one, and and I got a night meeting at another one, and I can't stay awake, and you don't tell sleep when to come. It tells you when it's coming. And you can say all you want to, keep your eyes open. It's not about your brain operating at that particular time, because your brain is operating according to its need for sleep. So what you usually have to do is you have to put your mind in high gear with a stimulant like black coffee or whatever. But the best thing you can do when you get to the place where you can't keep your eyes open is to find some place safe to go to sleep. Air. Can't live without air. And if you want to know how strong the urge is for air, you try to put a pillow over somebody's face. They will kill you. Water. You can go a long time without food, but man, you can't go but a couple of days without water. And then sex. Why is sex so important? Why is there such a drive? Because if you didn't have sex and have kids, the human race would vanquish. That's why God made it such a strong drive, so you could procreate. We need more Christians, all right? We need more good people. Hopefully I'm talking to good people. I think I am, because you want to help people. That makes you good. Okay. Too bad we can't pass the counselor gene on, the therapist gene on to our children. So that's the first level. The second level, now going up the pyramid, is our need for safety, for shelter, for security, for money. Security, money. All right? Now, it's not the love of, we're not loving money. We have a need for it. All right? We have a need to buy food, or to pay for a place to sleep, or to get into fresh air, or to drink pure water. It takes money. All right? So, I mean, if you know that somebody stole something because they were driven to it, they tried everything else so they wouldn't lose their house, and so they just stole some money. Well, that's different than someone that's greedy, wants to buy a new Cadillac, and
a new fur coat and all this other kind of stuff. And when you have corporate greed where people are stealing money that don't need it, Lord have mercy. They're not like Robin Hood, okay? Stealing from the rich to give to the poor. They're stealing from the rich and the poor. But they're not doing it out of a basic need. Not one of the basic drives that we've covered so far. The third level is once you have your physiological needs taken care of, food, sleep, water, air, sex, and you feel safe, you got shelter, you got a little bit of security, then you have a need to belong and for love, for acceptance, and for affection. All right? All of those belong in that third level. Belonging. And I guarantee you, if you run these groups right, you know what I mean? People will start bonding with the other people in the group. And they'll start getting healed off each other. It's almost that they start growing together. And they get to the place where they feel belongingness. All right? And when the groups are over, they'll do like they've done for me for years. They call back and they say, oh, I really missed the group. And, how's so-and-so doing, etc. That's the kind of therapist I want you to be, or group facilitator. Then the fourth level is the need for self-esteem and for respect. We're going to be talking about that as we go further into how to foster in the group self-esteem and self-respect. But it begins with the facilitator. You have to have a deep regard for the feelings and the beliefs of everybody in the group, even if you don't agree with them. It's theirs. All right? Everybody needs self-esteem. Everybody needs to feel good for having a brain or for even participating. Even if their participating isn't up to par, or might be divisive at a time, but they need to be getting credit because they could be sitting there not saying anything. And then the last level that Maslow had was what he called self-actualization. But when you read his book on self-actualization, it really is our spiritual need. That's the top of the pyramid. It's the top of the pyramid. And too bad that most people don't feel that need until they're getting ready to die. So I want to ask you a question. I want you to take that pyramid. Here's your fourth assignment. I want you to take that pyramid. And I want you to look at all those things. Start with the bottom level, the physiological level. And here's the question. How do you feel when your needs are not met on each level? How do you feel? And I want you to go back and I want you to look at that wheel and put an emotion down here. When your need for food isn't met, how do you feel? If you can't come up with it, look at the wheel. All right? How do you feel when your need for sleep isn't met, or your need for air or water or sex? How do you feel when you're not safe, or you're out and you're not in the shelter and it's storming or something, or you don't feel secure? How do you feel when you're broke? Okay? How do you feel when you're not getting, the nurturing that you need, and the love and the acceptance and the affection? How do you feel when you have low self-esteem? How do you feel when people are not respecting you? How do you feel when you just don't feel spiritual? Come on, folks, work with me on this. These are healthy exercises. This is helping you get into you, but listen to me. If you can understand you can understand 1,000 people like you. That means there's 1,000 people that you could reach better than anybody else. So don't slack on this. This is not just something to do. This is something to take you to the next level. All right? Know thyself. So the Bible says, know yourself. All right? Go ahead and answer the questions. The last motto is called our motto of normality. And I don't need to talk too much about it. But it's a scale from 0 to 10. You used it in every one of your lessons. 3 to 7 is normal. If they're above normal, we have to have spiritual interventions that bring them down past 7. So that they land somewhere between 3 and 7. If they're below normal, we got to figure out a way to bring them up past 3. That's what the interventions are meant to do. That's what healing is all about. A person that's over 7 is sick. A person that's under 3 is sick. We have to heal them so they become normal, level, balanced, homeostatic. All right? I'm covering a lot of territory tonight, I know. I'm getting ready to wrap up. But I did throw in there another scale of measurement for you. And some of you that are going to be working with people that are in hospitals or institutionalized, and etc. This one is a numeric pain intensity scale. It also goes from 0 to 10. That's 0. No pain. And then it goes up to 1 and 2. Okay, they're hurting a little bit. And then more and more and more until finally at 9 and 10, they are really, really in pain. So you need to be able to look at a person. They got these little stick faces there to show that the size of the lips, the size of the eyes, direction of your mouth, all of this changes according to pain. I did throw another model in there, and I'm not going to discuss it with this particular class, but it's called the model number 5 of fallible human being. And there are 4 things that we will discuss when we get to that model. What are fallible human beings? These are things that we all have in common. We're all fallible human beings. We all learn, and if we learn, we have a capacity to unlearn if it's negative. There's such a thing as a dichotomy of being. Everything in our body is either on or off. There's no middle ground. And then the directional, we're all directional beings. In other words, a healing starts from the top down and from the inside out. Those 2 directions, all human beings. Next week, webinar, Understanding the Brain Mind of Fallible Human Beings. I wouldn't miss it for all the tea in China. Okay. Make sure that if there's somebody that didn't make it this past week, and we had a record group of people this past week, all right, if they didn't make it for this particular webinar, of course, they're going to pick it up by going up to CST Academy into the library, level 1 webinars. And this will be there as a video. All right. This is Dr. Rick McKinney signing off. Cognitive Spiritual Therapy, education, training, internships. And your internships are coming soon. God bless you in the name of Jesus.
Absolutely. We've only just begun. Okay, disregard the homework assignments that were on that particular video. Remember, I'm reviewing some of the material that we've had that I need for you to go back and look at your notes and or whatever, and just the information that you need to be all that you can be as a faith-based counselor, therapist, and a group facilitator. Thank you for tuning in. See you next week.